Welcome to Know What I Mean. My name is Oscar.
My name is George, and in this episode, well, we got pretty out there with some kind of spiritually stuff, and definitely some things that I guess I'm much more comfortable with now, but that would have seemed pretty weird to be even entertaining if you'd asked me a little while ago. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting episode, actually.
Yeah, for me, it's I was surprisingly inspired talking about it. I think I started getting excited, like writing the notes about it, and then actually when we got into conversation, because this is an area I don't get to talk about much, I felt quite animated by it, really. And I think one thing to say before you start listening to the episode, I guess, is that this is a perfect arena to just play with the ideas that we're talking about. Because it does definitely go into a more kind of religious aspect, and we're talking about ritual today. So, if this is something that you feel unsure about, you're listening to a podcast, like, you're in no danger. Just mull it over and see what you think. And if you do have any questions about it, I'd love to talk more about it. So you can get in touch via Instagram or using our email, and it's a very interesting topic. So I hope you enjoy the episode.
Let's get into it.
The quote for this week is not really a quote. It's not really a story. It doesn't feel long enough to be a story. I'm not quite sure what to call it, but I shall read it nonetheless. Zen master, why do we do all these bows? Who are we bowing to? You are not bowing to anyone outside. When you bow, it is your small self bowing to your true self. That's all. This is by Zen master 𝗀𝗀𝗏, which most definitely won't be pronounced like that. I got this quote thing from a book that I was reading recently about a woman that goes on a 100-day meditation retreat. So it's in a spiritual context, obviously. And this little story, I suppose it struck me because it relates to an area of my life that we definitely don't talk about a huge amount on the podcast, and I don't actually talk about all that much at all in general, but actually it is actually quite significant to me. And so I saw this as an opportunity to explore something that I think will be quite I'm really intrigued actually what your response has been to it, because I know how my relationship is with it, but yeah, I'm really intrigued about your response. But I'll quickly run through some initial little kind of ideas. Well, the first thing I should probably do is just define small self and true self for anyone that is unclear of what they mean. The small self in spiritual circles really is referring to a quite limited and reactive self. You might think also of like the sort of lizard brain, the fight or flight response, and a very small self captures it quite well in that it is when you are feeling very small and limited. Often it is just you literally responding to whatever's going on or being on autopilot, for example. Like today, definitely for me has been quite a small self sort of day. I feel fine now, actually, but I definitely experienced today as being, I've basically been in the house all day, been quite grumpy for some reason. And my world has shrunk down to popping on my phone, checking social media, feeling a bit out of sorts and a bit grumpy, and just sort of reacting to the situation. I'm really trying my absolute hardest to not be irritable with my girlfriend, basically, which is coming up in my mind. So that's small self. True self is really referring to you at your ultimate potential, at your most at ease, open, spontaneous, wise, compassionate. Just, I mean, I suppose you can refer to it in two ways. You could either think of, just imagine you on literally your best day. So that would be maybe your true self. That's the self that is completely unhindered and just free. or you can refer to your true self as being essentially your enlightened self. So what it's your capacity, your potential as a human being. And we've talked about before on episodes, it can also be referred to as your Buddha nature. So within yourself is this pure, unhindered version of who you are, and that's your Buddha nature. That is your true self. So those are the two definitions of those for you. I'm wondering if I should go into a bit more now, or if it will be.
Well, it'd be so it'd be interesting actually because I didn't actually know the definitions for your small self and your true self. So I've kind of just been, going off what I intuit from those. So it's interesting to actually hear the specifics of how you would define those within like a Buddhist context. Because I had a similar idea for the small self of what that would be, but with the true self, I guess I was thinking of that as essentially you're bowing to the truth that you are everything, that you're part of this universe. And like, I guess so there's two ways really to describe it, that you are everything, that you are at least you're part of everything. There's because your small self, how I saw it, is just the self that you're aware of your body and your thoughts and your stories and everything about you. And then the true self I saw as everything else, really. And in terms of your direct experience, you can say that you are everything, because everything that you perceive is perceived through you. So even when you see a car drive past or a cloud in the sky, that is also you, because it's arising within you. As we talked a bit about in previous episodes, how people will interpret the world in different ways. So how you see something can be very different to how someone else sees something. And I saw this as a way of bowing to that, of this kind of unknowable thing that you are part of, and you have the part that you're aware of, but that you are also everything else. And that's where I was going with this.
Well, I guess it's not too far off in a way, because if you were to refer to true self as being the enlightened mind or the enlightened being, then there would be a recognition of interconnectedness and this sense of wholeness, or that you are completely part of everything and what is going on. So I guess it's the same thing. I suppose the only difference would be with the small self, in that I was referring to that as a more contracted state. Well, the way that I approached this was that you may have had experiences of being your true self to some degree.
Okay.
And we definitely had experiences of being a small self, and that the small self is more, it's not a normal state, it's just a more kind of contracted one. But to be honest, like, I think it's completely fine that there's those different interpretations of it. Like, I think that works really well. So I think the main thing about this quote is this aspect of bowing to. That was something that I kept on coming back to, and something I'm really interested in. So when I first went along to a Buddhist center and started getting involved, then this whole aspect of Buddhist ritual in which you are bowing to a shrine, or you're bowing to anything, in fact, was there was a lot of resistance there, because of these thoughts around like that it's a sign of being subservient or being indoctrinated, or being part of a cult, or just following what other people are doing. And also this idea that if you're bowing, then you must be bowing to a god. That's also, I had that in my head as well, that that I was bowing to this greater being. Like, who am I bowing to? Like, what's the point of bowing? If there's no God in Buddhism, then what the hell is this? Why am I doing this? This just, it just really felt very uncomfortable. And I think that's definitely part of our conditioning and our generation's conditioning is to find that, to be very skeptical of that. I suppose what I have found in time is once that skepticism has been ground down, no, once
So you've been
once that
brainwashed enough.
Yeah, basically, yeah. No, what basically once my initial, quite natural skepticism and like basically not really understanding what was going on or why we were doing it, once that was kind of put a bit more at ease, and I could see that I was dealing with rational people, and there was some, even if it wasn't super clear, but there was some explanation for what was going on, I became more comfortable and I could drop into this really interesting and powerful area of bowing to something greater. And I think that connects to the word that was coming up a lot for me was being humbled or being humble. So I think part of the reason why we're so skeptical of rituals like this is because we've been conditioned to be very anti-Christian, or to kick back against, like our parents' generation kind of kicking back against religion, and that's for good reason. Basically, there was an abuse of power in a lot of cases. And I think it led to that skepticism largely. But alongside that, I think we've sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. There's so much potential in this aspect of bowing, of being smaller than, in a way, and just saying, basically bowing to something. And I think that comes down to being humble.
I mean, it makes sense to be skeptical of those sorts of things. You shouldn't just go around bowing to whoever says to bow. I think that's a good trait to have. But yeah, as you're talking about it, I think there is something really nice about that. Just being alive can be really awe-inspiring, because you really don't know what the hell is going on, how this happened. Like, there's so much unknown, and I can see that could actually be quite a nice thing to do, to just be like, in some ways, submitting to this, the fact that you're part of this ocean, this on, a ship on the ocean, and that you're kind of are at the mercy of the ocean. You can do what you can to navigate it, but you are essentially at the mercy of life. And I think that, that can actually could make you feel maybe more connected with life, to really realize, like, this is a crazy thing that I don't really have complete control over, and that's fine. You can take responsibility for your life and being a good person and living up to your values and all of those things. But there is a certain level where you kind of just have to surrender to the craziness of life, and the awesomeness and the unknown of being a human. And I think that's quite a beautiful thing. Something that definitely haven't thought about bowing to it before. But I do like that idea of acknowledging the awesomeness and the unknown of being a human.
Yeah. And what you just said, it made me think of that, to give a bit of an explanation of what's going on here, which is captured in the quote. If I go up to a shrine, in a Buddhist center or on retreat, then what I'm bowing to is, it's almost life itself. It's like, it might have a Buddhist image. But the Buddha is a symbol of this potential for so much more, for, this like stuff that's so incomprehensible and so much bigger than yourself, like much bigger than yourself. And the process of going up and actually saying, on some level, in front of this vastness, I really don't know what's going on. I'd really compare it to people's experience of looking up at the stars, and you look up and there is a sense of insignificance. I mean, for me, but in like the best sort of way. It's like, as much as I can learn and know, like, I really just don't understand quite how vast this really is. And I'd say that there's a real similar flavor in me bowing to a shrine, for example. And that is, I suppose, my small self bowing to the potential and vastness or the true self. Yeah. And so it's not a god, it is literally just like this vast unknown, you know. I thought I could set the scene of the sort of thing that I've done on retreat, just to give a bit of context for what it might look like.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to have your skeptical mind flagging up lots of I think like it's so interesting, you know, like the kind of the connections that we have with ritual nowadays is very, like, considering that ritual is something we've done as long as human beings have been around, basically, you know, doing some sort of religious ritual or some sort of ritual has been around for as long as we've been around. And in the last maybe 100 years, there's been a real rejection of that kind of thing. So it's, you know, as strange as all this potentially sounds, like this has been going on a hell of a long time, and it's and there is something in it. So in Buddhism, then a ritual is called a puja, and it is it's a combination of mantra, so chanting and reading certain scriptures, of giving offerings and bowing, and there's candles, and, you know, setting the scene. I might be on retreat, for example, and someone set up this really, like, you're in this really big shrine room, so this, you know, very like big beautiful room, and at the front of it is a shrine, and there's a Buddha figure on the shrine, and potential multiple Buddha figures on the shrine, often like with flowers and incense and lots of candles and things like that. So you can imagine something quite kind of magical, really, like if you're imagining sort of a mystical space, something that is, yeah, something that evokes a sense of magic for you. That's the sense that you can get from it. And there'll be a process of reading certain Buddhist texts collectively, and then doing mantras, so chanting, and that's, well, it doesn't tend to be in English, it will be in like a much more ancient language. And during that chanting, which is really quite amazing to do as a collective, I suppose it's like singing or something, you know, you like, it's really vibrating throughout the room, it's getting your whole body involved in this process of chanting these words. And you get a real sense of this, the collective in the room. And then as this mantra is going on, then you approach the shrine and you'll bow. And again, because of this, there's a collective significance going on there. So it's like, even if you're coming from the most rational atheist perspective, you can put it a bit like there's a collective meaning going on, you know, a collective significance going on. It's not that there is a god, a dormant god there, or a god there that is you are chanting to or you are bowing to. It is that collectively you're evoking this significance and meaning through what you're doing. And the fact that it's very ancient texts and that this has been done by millions of people throughout history can add to that sense, but it might not at all be significant that the texts are ancient. And when you're bowing, then it is like all this charged energy, all this build up of meaning it really does feel like you're bowing to something big, you know, like much vaster than yourself. And the thing is when bowing, the ego can't really bow. There's no way of looking cool while you're bowing, or like holding on to a very inflated sense of self. It's very difficult because you're literally saying, this is bigger than me. This is more important than me. And so it's very difficult to add that to your sense of identity in that moment. So that can be, again, why it's quite significant. And then you might give an offering of a candle, and in that offering, again, you're and I'm sure this is, you know, you'd have some references to hypnosis with this, but like there's this object of a candle or incense, you're pushing meaning to that, you're bringing meaning to that, and saying that this symbolizes, this is a symbol of something, whether this is care for who's in the room, or this is me publicly stating a commitment to this bigger thing, and that people are seeing me do this. So it can be a lot around just symbolism, really. And then you put this candle down and you bow again, and throughout this whole ritual you're deepening a sense of commitment to something bigger than yourself. And it's so different to the usual quite individualistic sense that we might have about our own spiritual journeys or our journeys of, self-improvement or whatever, where we're kind of doing it on our own. This really gets something else, like another aspect in there of allowing there to be this sense of unknown and recognizing that you're small in a way, but in the best kind of way.
Yeah.
You're not,
Yeah, it does tie in nicely to the ego, because it is literally saying like, yeah, I don't know exactly what's going on. I don't really have everything under control. And that can be quite a scary thing to say. And even in saying it, then I feel like some resistance of like, I want to be in control of things and be able to know what's going on. And, you can to some extent, but ultimately there's no way that I or anyone else can really fully comprehend the universe. Like, it's just not even anywhere close. It's just a completely different thing that we're part of, but we just don't fully understand, and something that's incredibly powerful. Yeah, this actually made me think about how connected you are with everything else. And that is why you're bowing to this thing, I see, because this thing is in some way influencing your life, this vastness. And there's a really nice quote actually from Alan Watts, which we're not going to do for next week's quote, but I just thought I'd share it here, which is, "You and I are all as much continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean." And that's just a really great way of showing how connected we are, and how, we draw a line around ourself, literally ourself, as distinct from the rest of being. And, how I was seeing the small self and the big self is, the line that we have around which is what is us and what is ourself. That is the small self, and the big self is everything else. As I was saying earlier, like there's two different ways that you can see yourself as being everything, because there's two main ways of seeing. Well, I don't know if there's loads of different ways, but you can think of reality as just in your head. So you can just go purely based on experience, not even going into like there being an external world that you're experiencing, but just saying like, this could all just be things that are happening in my mind. I could be in a simulation, whatever it is. So if you go from that point of view, then as I was saying before, like you can be everything, because everything is being experienced through you. Everything you can experience is experienced through you. So you are everything that you can experience. You're not just, your body, you are everything, the sky and the ground and your friends, like you're everything. And that's one way of looking at it. But also you can look at it from the view of there being an external universe, a material universe. If you think about the Big Bang, if you imagine, and this is one of my favorite things to think about, but like if you think of the Big Bang and this just expansion that's happened, to kind of an explosion, an unfathomable explosion. As this explosion has gone out, things have changed and blown up and collided, and it really is an explosion. And if you think of like a fire, how that goes into flames and goes to a little point on the fire with a little spark. We are like one of those sparks. Like we are part of the explosion. Like it's still happening, and we are like a weird little spark or a little twisting eddy that's built into that thing. And we're completely inextricable from that. We are part of that initial explosion, and that is going to change, and it's living through us right now, but we're going to change and become a different part of the explosion. But it's all directly connected to that initial Big Bang. And in that way, you really are everything. You really are the entire material universe. That's what you are. The same way that a wave is also the ocean. You're like a peak of a wave that has said, I am this wave, this is me. But you're also the entire ocean. And this idea of the small self bowing to the big self really tied in so nicely to that for me. You are bowing to the rest of the universe, which is of the same thing that you are. You are completely part of it. And that's a kind of awesome thing to realize and to recognize that you are the Big Bang yourself.
So for you, what would be your equivalent of bowing then to that big self?
I guess the way that I've done it really is just like a recognition of that. And I do like the idea of bowing, because it's a more formal way of really building in a ritual to it, because those things are so powerful. So I do like the sound of that. But yeah, I guess all that I've done so far is more just a recognition of that fact and just thinking like, wow, that's incredible. And yeah, feeling humbled by it. But yeah, ritual is such a powerful thing. And like you said, it's something that's innately human. It's something that we're just drawn to. And I think it's a shame to get so, in getting so atheistic and logical about everything. I think that might mean we lose some fun and some magic that is actually part of being human. And also how things have moved a lot towards logic and science. And this sounds crazy that like I'm denigrating science as like a bad thing, which is not at all. It's more that an obsession with that type of thinking. You can have the logical thinking and logical intelligence and emotional intelligence. And I think that we can get very caught up in this thinking that the logical way of thinking about things is the best. But there can be some real value, and just part of being a human is that emotional thinking about things and exploring those concepts of the unknowable and having rituals around that. And there's so much meaningful experience that is to be had there that it would be a shame, and it is a shame, to strip that out of modern life. And I think by getting rid of that stuff, you really can lose some of the most meaningful feelings that humans can have.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking, well, I guess I was reflecting on why that might have happened, that we have taken that out, and I touched upon it earlier, but it comes from a place of intelligence to be skeptical of people that tell you what to do, or that they know what they're doing, or that you need to follow what they're doing. That definitely is coming from a place of intelligence. And I think the skepticism, as mentioned earlier, it does come from that trust that we put in people being abused. So because it can be incredibly dangerous to trust someone fully, but there's a reason why we do choose to do that again and again, despite the fact that we do end up getting hurt. It's because trusting people, or allowing yourself to be led by certain things, higher self or the universe even, but it also could be just people with a lot more experience or wisdom than yourself. They can guide you much more effectively when you're being as receptive as possible. It's like when children are both extremely vulnerable and also very fast learners, because they're so open, and that leaves a lot of room for abuse. But in so many cases, just with parents with very good intentions, the fact that their children are so open means that children can learn quickly and really deeply. And that is the potential of rituals like this, or in fact, I guess like having elders or having people that are more experienced than yourself saying, for this to work effectively, you can't just be doubting everything I'm saying all the time, because it's so halted and difficult to do anything that way. And I think, and that's also in these moments of ritual, they really work, and you really tap into something when the trust is completely there, and you are vulnerable giving that trust. Like undoubtedly you are vulnerable, and that's why it takes a while to get to that point. But there's so much potential there as well.
Yeah, well, I was having actually a similar conversation to this at jiu-jitsu, because, there was a kid who started training there who, when he was like 17, and he just did like every single thing the tutor said. Like he wasn't trying to question it or think about how it wouldn't work or anything like that. He was just like everything he said, he just did it. And that is such an effective way to learn. If you trust the tutor, if you've decided, okay, this is someone I trust, then to just follow them, because they are telling you the things they're telling you to do are for a reason. Maybe they haven't fully articulate the reason to you or whatever it is, but you're going to learn quicker if you just do what they've told you to do.
Yeah, but I think there is definitely equivalence to essentially not with your jiu-jitsu example of being I'm not quite believing that the system you're learning in is the best and that you want to what is it something your bets
hedge your bets.
Yeah, you want to hedge your bets.
Yeah,
I think that's right. Yeah, and obviously it can seem like it's coming from a place of intelligence. I'd like to bring this back to the quote, but I think they are definitely linked. I suppose it's a certain mindset which I'm really familiar with in myself because I've definitely done it within spirituality of kind of believing that it's coming from a place of wisdom to be seeking lots of different traditions and trying to find the ultimate way of doing something, when actually it might be a bit of that. Maybe there is some intelligence in that, but I think largely it is that it feels risky to put all my eggs in one basket and really trust in one particular process. Even though the rewards are so great with that, it feels really risky to do that, which is fair enough. Because as you said, if you get it wrong, then it can go quite badly. But if you don't try at all, it's maybe not, it's not a full life. It's not a full experience if you're just skating along the surface of things. And so I think it really links in with this aspect of your small self bowing to your true self, because there are two options. And the option that the majority of people take is hedging their bets and saying, I don't want to bow to anything. You know, I don't really believe in this. That's a bit kind of out there. If it's not provable, you know, what can I like? It's sort of this cultural skepticism of anything that goes beyond just the normal, ordinary kind of life and what I'm directly experiencing. And yeah, if you're not quite sure who you're bowing to, it doesn't seem worth doing at all. But it's actually, you've got that option. The problem with that is that it's so easy for the ego to come in there and really give a very strong sense of definition between yourself and everyone else, like, and the entire world, you know, and there's not really so much of a bridge there, because when I'm not bowing or doing the equivalent of bowing, which is just comprehending that, or not comprehending, like, but basically just, I have to acknowledge that I don't know, or that there's just so much that I don't know and I just won't know. And there is something much bigger going on, essentially. Like, it doesn't have to be physically bowing, but it's the equivalent of recognizing that. If I don't do that for a period, my sense of identity and this small self, it kind of crystallizes into this very fixed world of my very narrow view of how things are. And I have access to the internet and I have all the information there. So I don't, you know, there isn't any real mystery anymore. Like, it's all accessible. I can find it all out. And, you know, it gets into a quite controlled and narrow sort of headspace. When I choose to bow in whatever form, it opens things up again. It does that thing of looking at the stars and being like, yeah, this is huge. And I don't quite know what's going on. And that's beautiful. That's, you know, that's a really beautiful thing. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a cool moment to move on to the quote for next week, which I have ready just here. And I was thinking with this quote, really, I wanted to have something a bit more that felt more practical, because we've had some really interesting talks recently, but I felt like a very grounded, practical quote. So that's what we're going for today. And it's from Thomas Carlyle. And the quote is, "It is not our goal to see what lies dimly in the distance, but to do what lies clearly at hand." So if you've got any thoughts about that quote or the quote that we've just had for this episode, then send us a message on Instagram, which is knowwhatimean.podcast, or you can send us an email, and we've got the email address down in the description. So yeah, if you want to support the podcast, you can share this with a friend, someone you think that would enjoy this type of conversation. And if you want to support the podcast financially, then you can just buy us a coffee, and we've got the link to do that down in the description. So thanks for listening, and enjoy the rest of your week. Peace.